In 2025 photographs of Sylvester Stallone at a public event circulated with the kind of quiet attention that attaches itself to images of famous people showing their age. The photographs were not unkind, they were simply true. Which is the thing about certain images that the people in them cannot control. He has not hidden it. He has not complained about it. He has continued to show up, which is the only response to time's accounting that has ever been available to him. Because showing up is the thing he has been doing since a pair of forceps at his birth in Hell's Kitchen in 1946 left a nerve damaged and a face partially altered and a voice thickened in a way that the world would spend years mocking before it spent decades worshipping. He is 78 years old. The body remembers everything it was asked to do, and the man inside it has arrived finally at something that took longer to reach than any championship. He was born on July 6, 1946, at the Hospital for Joint Diseases in New York City, in the neighborhood of Hell's Kitchen, which was an accurate name for the environment into which Sylvester Stallone arrived. The delivery was complicated. Forceps were used, and the forceps damaged the nerve that controlled the left side of his face. The damage was permanent. His lower lip drooped on that side. His speech was affected in ways that were audible and visible from his earliest attempts at language, producing the thick, effortful delivery that became his signature, and that he had to live inside for years before any audience decided to find it compelling. Children heard it first. Children noticed before they understood what they were noticing, and then they used what they noticed the way children use whatever is available to establish where they stand relative to someone else. He felt the quick, suppressed laughs. He noticed the long, uncomfortable stares. He understood, in the wordless way that children understand these things, before they have the vocabulary to name them, that he was starting from behind. The home offered no relief from what the world outside it provided. His parents' marriage was fractured in the specific way that fractures a household into something that moves around rather than settles. And Stallone's early years included time in foster care, time in boarding situations, the sustained instability of a childhood that never fully landed anywhere that felt permanent. The feeling of being unwanted, which is what that kind of instability communicates, regardless of the intentions behind it, settles into a person before they have the defenses to resist it. It settled into him. He has spoken about it in enough interviews across enough decades that the accounting is now part of the public record, but the living of it was private and early and produced something that would not be visible to the world for another 30 years. What he found in cheap theaters alone in the dark was the education that the classroom had not provided. He watched men on screen who commanded rooms without needing a perfect face or a voice that moved easily through words. He watched the specific authority of men who had decided that their presence was sufficient, and he filed that information somewhere that it became available to him later. He also found iron. Lifting whatever heavy objects he could locate in the makeshift basements and back rooms that were available to him, he discovered that the resistance of dead weight was honest in a way that the social world was not. Weight did not mock him. Weight did not look away. It simply was what it was and required what it required, and if he applied enough force for enough time, it yielded. That was an education more durable than anything the classroom had attempted to give him. His teenage years did not resolve the difficulty. They added to it. But something was accumulating inside the accumulation of difficulty, which was the specific discipline of someone who has learned that the external world will not arrange itself in his favor and has therefore decided to become the arrangement himself. He was not waiting to be rescued. He was not waiting to be discovered. He was building the capacity to do something with whatever became available, and the patience required for that kind of building when you are a teenager with a damaged nerve and an unstable home and no obvious path forward is not something that can be externally supplied. It has to come from somewhere inside. It came from somewhere inside Stallone. The forceps had rung an opening bell before he was ready, and he had been fighting ever since. Not for applause, not yet, but for the right to be seen and heard and taken seriously by a world that had not yet indicated it was going to extend that courtesy voluntarily. He arrived in New York in the early 1970s with the intention of becoming an actor, and the reality of being an unknown with a damaged face, a heavy voice, and the kind of resume that did not open the right doors. He understood quickly that he was not going to be cast as the traditional leading man. That category was occupied by faces and voices that the industry had already decided were appropriate for it, and his were not among them. So he took what was offered, which was the rough characters, the tiny parts, the forgettable appearances that kept him inside the industry without giving him any real position within it. He did whatever it took to survive another week in a city that was not paying particular attention to him. One of those survival measures in 1970 was a role in a low-budget adult film called The Party at Kitty and Studs, for which he was paid $200 over 2 days of work. He has spoken about it directly and without evasion. He was broke, he needed the money, and the alternative was to sleep on a bus station bench, which he had done before. The film was recut and re-released under different titles after his fame made it commercially interesting to people who had not been interested in it before, and Stallone's response to its re-emergence was the same response he has applied to most of the difficult facts of his biography, which is to acknowledge it plainly, explain the circumstances, and decline to be defined by it. He was a young man in an impossible situation, making the decision available to him. He made the film. He moved on. He wrote Rocky. He also, in the intervals between the small work, wrote. He sat in a freezing apartment with almost nothing and a rusted typewriter and produced the script for Rocky Balboa, a small-time club fighter from Philadelphia who was a joke to everyone around him and who wanted only to go the distance to prove that he was not another forgotten man from the neighborhood who had come and gone without leaving a mark. The parallel to the man writing the script was precise enough that it required no explanation. Stallone was writing his own interior life onto paper and giving it the shape of a story that other people might recognize. The story was recognized. The studios read the script and loved it, and looked at the man who had written it and shook their heads. They wanted a name in the role, someone the audience already trusted, someone who would move tickets without requiring the risk of an unknown. They began offering to buy the script. The offers climbed. Some accounts put the figure as high as $360,000, which was a number that had no relationship to the reality of the apartment Stallone was living in or the financial pressure he was under at the time. It was an amount that could have answered every immediate problem in his life. He said no. He said no because he understood with the clarity of someone who had been forming this understanding since the playground and the school bus and the dinner table of his childhood, that if he sold the script and watched another man play Rocky, the regret would follow him longer than the money would last. He was willing to stay broke rather than sell himself. The studio eventually relented, gave him a tight budget and a modest salary, and Stallone walked onto a film set that felt by his own account like the first place in his life where everything that had happened to him finally made sense. Rocky was shot in 28 days on a budget of approximately $1 million. It earned $225 million worldwide. It won the Academy Award for Best Picture at the 49th ceremony, where it was nominated in 10 categories total. Stallone became the third person in Oscar history to receive simultaneous nominations for Best Actor and Best Writing in the same year after Charlie Chaplin and Orson Welles. The detail about who preceded him is important, because it is not a category for ordinary achievements. The film was not just a commercial success, it was a cultural event, the kind of story that arrives at the precise moment a culture needs it, and becomes part of the way that culture understands itself. The sequels built the franchise into something global and durable. Rocky II in 1979, Rocky III in 1982, which introduced Mr. T as Clubber Lang and earned $270 million worldwide. Rocky IV in 1985, which became the highest-grossing film in the series at that point, earning $300 million, and which was later credited with a degree of affection that its creators did not anticipate, as having played a cultural role in the geopolitics of the Cold War's final years. Rocky Balboa in 2006, which arrived when Stallone was 60 years old, and which critics had prepared to dismiss, and instead found themselves watching something that worked a story about a man past his prime who refuses to accept that the terms of his life have been settled by someone other than himself. Creed, in 2015, in which he played Rocky as an aging trainer to a young fighter, and for which he received a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor and an Academy Award nomination. The role required him to play mortality rather than defeat it, and he did it without the armor he had worn through the previous decades. Rambo ran alongside Rocky in the parallel track of his career, and the two franchises together constructed the public image that followed him everywhere. John Rambo was a Vietnam veteran, so damaged by what the war had done to him and what the country had done to veterans after the war, that he had become a man the civilian world could not contain. The silence of the character, the way he communicated through action rather than language, was a specific response to the years of being a child whose voice was an obstacle rather than a tool. He understood what silence could carry. He built an icon out of it. First Blood in 1982 earned $230 million worldwide against a $14 million budget. The franchise extended across 4 sequels and more than 3 decades, and produced images that entered the visual vocabulary of global popular culture so completely that they are now simply part of the landscape. The physical cost of building that landscape was not metaphorical. He performed a significant percentage of his own stunt work across decades of productions that required him to absorb real impact. He broke ribs during the filming of Rocky IV in a fight sequence with Dolph Lundgren that was shot with enough genuine force that Stallone spent days in an intensive care unit afterward with a swollen pericardium. The injury during The Expendables, sustained in a fight scene with Steve Austin, required a metal plate to be inserted in his neck. The cumulative damage to his back required multiple spinal fusions across the years, and the procedures that followed each one were the kind of recoveries that the industry does not photograph and that the public does not see because they do not fit the image that both parties had agreed to maintain. He has acknowledged all of it with a directness that does not invite pity and does not perform suffering. He simply accounts for the costs as a man accounts for them who understood from the beginning that nothing would be free. His personal life moved through losses that the physical ones did not prepare him for. His son Sage, who had appeared alongside him in Rocky V and who had pursued his own career in film and writing, died in July 2012 of coronary artery disease. He was 36 years old. Stallone has described the period after Sage's death as the darkest of his life. He has also said that he understands he will see his son again, which is a faith-based statement made by a man who needed something to hold on to and found it. He does not elaborate on it and does not defend it. He says it and lets it rest where it is. The loss of a child is a particular kind of grief that does not resolve into the ordinary forms that grief eventually takes. It does not become the thing you carry alongside your life. It becomes a dimension of the life itself present in everything, and addressed in nothing, because there is no address sufficient to it. Stallone has not performed this grief publicly. He has acknowledged it, stated its weight, and continued working, which is what he has always done with the things that could have stopped him. The work was always the place where the grief went when there was nowhere else for it to go. He married Jennifer Flavin in 1997 after a relationship that had begun in 1988 and included a separation that ended when Stallone sent her 12 roses a day for 12 days to communicate something he had not managed to communicate directly. They have 3 daughters together, Sophia, Sistine, and Scarlett. In 2022, there were reports of a separation, but by the end of that year, they had reconciled. He has spoken about family as the thing that survived when the noise of the career began to settle, which is the accounting of a man who built something enormous and then discovered what it had been built around. Tulsa King, the Paramount Plus series in which he plays a New York mob boss deposited in Oklahoma to start a criminal operation from scratch, arrived in 2021 and demonstrated that the audience for Stallone had not gone anywhere, and that his particular quality, the specific weight of someone who has been through actual difficulty and carries it in his body rather than performing it for the camera, remained exactly what it had always been. He was not defying gravity on screen anymore. He was using the gravity of his years as the material the character was made of. The audience watched and recognized what they were seeing, which was not the image of invincibility, but the truth of a man who had survived his own story long enough to play it straight. He has also returned to producing and developing projects with the same instinct for total creative control that he exercised on Rocky in 1975. The Expendables franchise, which he created and starred in, and which assembled action stars across 4 films, was partly a commercial exercise and partly an extended acknowledgement of the genre that had built him, a genre that he understood from the inside more than anyone else alive, and that he was qualified to curate in ways that studios without his history were not. He brought Schwarzenegger and Statham and Lee Jet and Bruce Willis and Dolph Lundgren into the same frame. And the result was not subtle, but then again, neither was anything he had done that actually worked. Because what actually worked was always full commitment. Nothing held back. Everything on screen and available to the audience. Which is the aesthetic of a man who was told for years that what he had was insufficient, and who responded by putting all of it in front of the camera and daring the room to look away. He is 78 years old, moving more carefully than he once did in a body that has given a full accounting of what it was asked to carry. He rises early. He still creates, still writes, still moves toward the work, because the work was always the thing that answered the specific question the forceps and the foster care and the freezing apartment had asked him. He has the homes and the collections and the financial harvest of a career built on refusing to accept what the world initially offered him. He uses none of it to prove anything. He uses it to be present for the people and the mornings that remain. The trophy case of his existence, as he has put it, is not what he looks at anymore. He looks at the family. He looks at the quiet. He looks at the man in the mirror who survived every version of himself that he had to leave behind to get here. That, he has said, is the hardest fight he ever had to win. He has won it. He is still standing. He always was. Which film of his has stayed with you the longest? And what do you think his story says about what it actually takes to go the distance? Let us know in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and we will see you in the next one.